Next thing is a little more practical and,
Yeah.
and clinical. I've been working on this thing I call integral recovery, working with addicts and alcoholics.
Sure.
And one of the causal things that we deal with in addiction is unresolved trauma. Okay. And about 2 years ago, I started incorporating binaural brain entrainment technology into this thing to really just juice it up, because Step 11 says through prayer and meditation, increase our conscious contact with God, but no instructions on how to do that one. And so I found that this binaural stuff, man, you're down in these deep states, and then Ken Wilber kicks in. Then I have the maps of all the critters that show up. But anyway, what I found is that, because sometimes you've mentioned how you in meditation misses the shadow stuff.
Yeah.
And what I in my personal practice, and then with the people I'm working with, is this pain from these different issues begins to emerge in the body. And on the top side of it, while it's still there, I can't listen to the messages because it's too deep, it's too painful, it'll kill you, it's your fault, this is hopeless, whatever.
Yeah.
So I focus the witness, and then that comes and it comes and it builds and it builds, and then it releases. And when it's released, whatever the issue was, whether it was sexual abuse or the war or whatever it was, it's gone and it doesn't come back. And underneath that, there's a spaciousness and emptiness that then you can listen to what comes out. There's a wisdom, there's an intuitive knowing then, but not on the top side.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of fictions, it's a bunch of stories you've spun in your ego. But then it's this bodily thing, and when it's gone, and you're free, and it doesn't come back. I find that's extraordinary, and I'm going, God, I wish Ken were here. I could ask him what's going on here. So that's my question.
Yeah. Did y'all hear that okay? Kind of the little bit of that? Has to do with using, in this case, you're also asking in relation to things like binaural beat technology, right?
Yes.
Where the tapes are taking you down some of these deeper areas.
Yes.
And
but it works without it after a while, too. You can do it just naturally without that. So.
Yeah. And that while down there, because the tapes will, through using upper right technology, it can move you from alpha or beta, which tend to dominate waking state, into theta, which tends to be dream state or also creativity states while you're awake, and then into delta, which is deep, formless sleep, and also some types of formless meditation. And there's several other things going on, but that's sort of the basic thing. Somewhere, do you know where you were? Were you theta to delta, just someplace down there?
Yeah, it's pretty much Holosync Bill Harris, so it's pretty delta.
Okay.
It takes you down through theta, but then into delta.
Okay.
Yeah.
It says delta, and for a lot of people, that's hard for them to actually get there. Binaural beats aren't that strong down at delta, so it's often theta, low theta, and a little bit of delta, and then some people go into it, but somewhere between theta and delta, which is certainly where a lot of theorists, including myself, think that that's a wavelength that a lot of shadow material tends to get kind of clogged up at. And you can gain access to it. Now the question is, though, that sometimes in meditation you miss shadow elements. So what's going on here? Is this really working? And I think, yes, it is. But I would give one caveat about it. One is that you're not doing this just yourself. So to some extent, there's another intentionality that's driving this process. And that outside intentionality has, in a sense, the same kind of effect as a therapist's intentionality, driving you into areas that you couldn't do on your own. So that's why some shadow stuff comes up using the tapes that doesn't come up using meditation on its own. But there's a second part that is you can get at a lot of the monsters of your unconscious like that, but not always the actual relationship of you to those monsters. And that's the trick. So for example, in a meditation state, in a dream state, you can get plunged down into, we just use just a big ogre monster as an example, is chasing you and wants to eat you or devour you or rip you open or whatever these things do, or you play mahjong or whatever your particular type of monster does. That to me is the most hideous thing that could happen. So I get the mahjong thing for hours and hours and hours. It has nothing to do with the fact that my mother played mahjong, so I don't want to get into that. It can get into some of those monsters, but the example that I would use in terms of getting at authentic emotions is often those monsters, you then have a fear reaction to them. Whereas actually, if you do therapeutic work, you're the monster in first person, and your authentic emotion under these circumstances is rage and destruction and hate, not fear. So you just have to keep that in mind. The fact that you can get down in there into some of these monsters doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting through the primary resistance area, which is owning it in the correct way. But still, going through and experience them on even that level can have important transformative changes.
Yeah, well, we've been using the 3-2-1 thing also.
Oh, well, that's okay.
Then there's this incorporated thing where the feeling just comes and it just goes and it releases.
That sounds exactly.
Yeah, so we're kind of using the cognitive and the corporal thing.
Yeah, the 3-2-1 thing, the reason that that's such a, and again, it's a simple introductory aspect. You can go on into much, continue to really deepen your shadow work. But 3-2-1 is an extraordinary process because it does exactly what is so very hard to do if you're suffering from some of these shadow issues. And that is, it actually reverses the direction of the shadow and it reverses the ownership. And that's what repression does. That's how people lie to themselves fundamentally. They won't lie about there being anger down there. They'll lie about who owns it. And every kid does this, right? You come in, there's a mess on the floor. Your mom says, "Who did that?" You go, "That's a mess, not me." Mom knows better, and so does the therapist. That's what 3-2-1 does, is it gets you to not just acknowledge the mess, but to acknowledge ownership, authorship, and directionality. So that's why it's such a really an extraordinary, 3-2-1 is sort of to the whole depth psychology stuff that Big Mind is to Zen meditation. In other words, it speeds it up and still gets the essence of it in a remarkably brief amount of time. And then, of course, if you want to go into it in more detail, you can. Using tapes is recommended. I particularly recommend using things like Holosync tapes if you also do some meditation on your own. Because when you get into a meditative state yourself, there's an extraordinary amount of intentionality that you put into it. And this will actually, if you look at this on a 16-channel EEG machine, for example, you'll see a very complex, rich sea of brain waves and brain patterns. Holosync and things like that, by nature, are somewhat limited. They're driving you down to just a particular wavelength using a particular technology. It's much harder to reproduce this extremely rich, kind of complex patterning that meditation is. So if you're doing some meditation on your own and you want to do some tapes, that's great. If you're the type of person that just isn't gonna do meditation or that kind of practice come hell or high water, then is it better to do Holosync or similar tapes than not do it? Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, well, that they don't have a lot of time. Either they get well soon or
also,
they die. Yeah, so there's that.
Yeah. And they're playing around with it. They've got gamma waves now, gamma states, apparently marking states of compassion. So, and Holosync, Bill, has got these 4 levels of gamma meditation. And so you can try those soon. Just be careful. So it sounds like you've had some luck with them, though.
So far, so good. Very good.
That's good. When you say that the problems resolve themselves more or less indefinitely, how long has the longest indefinitely been?
Oh, in my case, 3 years.
Yeah. I'd take that as good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that looks like it's really getting at the issues. Yeah. Good.